You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. I am your host, Dumisani Washington. It is Sunday, September the 8th, 2024, episode number 13. Again, we started this venture together back on Father's Day, this year, Father's Day, the third Sunday in June. And with the exception of a slight delay in our schedule, as I've shared with you already before, the passing of my dear father-in-law, my wife's father, several weeks ago, as well as her brother. There was a lot of movement and everything. Again, I don't want to be remiss and I may sound redundant, but I want to thank you again for your prayers for our family. My wife is doing well. She, of course, is grieving the loss of her father, but is surrounded by her family, her children, her grandchildren, and everything. We are just blessed and thankful to God for his goodness to us. And so, yes, we have a lot to talk about on today on our show, Truth to Power Live. We talk about everything from the Bible to music to politics, culture, the Black American community, current events, geopolitics, Israel, Africa, marriage, family, education, and yep, everything in between. We have a couple of things to get in on today. There is a ongoing issue here. October the 7th, the fateful day in which Hamas terrorist organization infiltrated Israel, killing or abducting up to some 1,300 Israeli men, women, and children, also foreign nationals. And there are still, even after recovering the bodies of 6 Israelis in Rafah, the stronghold there in Gaza, where Israel has been battling the terrorist organization, even after tragically recovering the remains of those hostages, there still remains over 100 Israeli hostages in Gaza after the attack on October 7th, which we are fastly coming up on a year. So those hostages have been there for over a year, not to mention the fact that there are still hostages that are there. The young man whose name is escaping me just right now, Mengistu, I'm saying the last name wrongly. He is the Ethiopian Israeli young man who years ago now, he's developmentally disabled. He was kidnapped by Hamas as well. He's been held in Gaza. His family don't know about his whereabouts. I think there was a video that was released of him maybe about a year or two ago. I don't know if they were able to authenticate it in terms of the time and all those things. So Hamas, again, which is funded largely by the Islamic Republic of Iran, also by Qatar, also by the United States government, because we give money to UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees. It has been proven time and time again that it is nothing but another Hamas stronghold and a money laundering organization. And so Hamas employees are part of UNRWA. Hamas school teachers are part of UNRWA. A couple of the hostages that they found were actually in the UNRWA teachers' school or house. And so, yeah, it's a very, very bad situation. So, again, won't be able to unpack all of that on today. If you saw the title on here, we deal with different topics on different weeks, and sometimes we do a deeper dive than others, depending on what it actually is. And I want to start today by talking about this letter. So a few weeks ago, there was, and I don't know if that's the correct timing, but maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a great deal of controversy that was coming out of what we call the Black for Palestine movement. That's a general term referring to Black Americans, particularly, not just Black Americans, Africans as well, but Black Americans who side politically, morally, in other ways with the pro-Palestinian movement, not just for Palestinian liberation, quote unquote, which we'll get into that some more, but as an anti-Zionist move, right? As something of a decolonizing, it's an anti-imperialist move that wrongly labels Israel in that way. It is old. This Black and Palestinian kind of synergy, if you will, goes back to the 1960s. This goes back to particularly some of the comments that Malcolm X made that were pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist, comments that Stokely Carmichael later on, who changed his name to Kwame Ture, made. These are some of the highlights or some of the well-known figures. Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panthers, as I've shared with you before, he was the Minister of Information for the Black Panthers that was based in Oakland, California. He too, and the Black Panthers, very pro-Palestinian, although he had a conversion experience in which he actually learned the truth and was able to then articulate that differently. Even as we said about Malcolm X before, he too was parroting talking points coming mainly from the Nation of Islam and his mentor Elijah Muhammad. It was at the time that Malcolm X had broke away from Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam that he began to articulate some different positions. He never addressed the Israel issue again, to our knowledge, after that breakaway in that sense, although he did make a couple of positive remarks about Zionism itself. And I mentioned that in my book, Zionism in the Black Church. So, but he was killed, ironically, 39 years old, just like Dr. King, who was killed at 39 years old. And he was in the midst of some sort of metamorphosis in his own life, both in his Islamic faith. He broke away from the Nation of Islam and more fully embraced what I don't know, for lack of a better term, a more orthodox Islam, or at least a more standard one universally. So there's a lot of those things, different of those things that were there. I mentioned those names because they touched on the whole Black for Palestinian issue, Black for Palestine issue. So what we had, however, is a situation at University of Michigan. University of Michigan, the Black Student Union issued a statement that I believe came out this past week. Right? It is, I'm going to share the graphic with you on the screen here in just a second, because I'm going to read from it. So I want you to at least know what I'm reading from. As a matter of fact, if I do it this way, I'm still kind of getting used to this here. You'll see it there. If you're, depending on what kind of screen you're looking at right there, you'll see it says on the top of there, it is the BSU statement on withdrawal from TAHRIR coalition. TAHRIR coalition. Now, TAHRIR is a acronym. I had to look that up. Although it sounds like something in Arabic, and those of you who may know, you can kind of give me a heads up if it does sound like a specific word in Arabic. I don't know, but TAHRIR, and I'm on their website real quick, as you can look at that graphic that's there. About us to do this. So TAHRIR stands for, it's an acronym for transparency, accountability, humanity, reparations, investment, and resistance. That's what TAHRIR stands for. This is the organization that mainly will it's advocating for Palestinian, not just human rights, but it's anti-colonial, anti-imperialist in terms of directing that wrongly at Israel. So that's the document there. I'm going to read from it here, and I won't have to keep it on the screen, but you can go there. As a matter of fact, this document is by the Black Student Union at University of Michigan. And I'm going to, in order for us to have this conversation in an effective way, my opinion, we're going to have to unpack some of these words. So now let me say this here before I begin to read from the document from the Black Student Union. A couple of weeks ago, episode 11, as a matter of fact, episode 11, whatever 2 weeks ago was, that was August something. I'll have to look at that and see. You can go on ttplive.com, ttplive.com. If you go on our website and you click on all episodes, you'll see that towards the bottom. You click on that, and it is our Podbean website. So this podcast is available on Apple. It's available on Spotify, I believe, and all the other podcast forums. It should be. If it's not there, just email us at info@ttplive.com. Let us know, hey, I looked for you at blah, blah podcast, and I didn't see you. So you should be able to check out all the episodes from 1 to, 13 won't be on there for another, day or so. This one. But it was episode 11. is actually, I believe the title of it had something to do with Cori Bush, who lost her. Cori Bush is a congresswoman out of St. Louis, Missouri, who lost her primary to another Democratic candidate. And it was widely reported that the AIPAC, the pro-Israel organization, funded in great part, Cori Bush's opponent. And Cori Bush said she was going to tear AIPAC's kingdom down, the whole thing, all the anti-Semitic, all the Israel stuff, right? I addressed that in episode 11, but I also addressed the growing animus, it seems, in the Black for Palestine movement, and that there were videos that were going up on TikTok and other places in which there were Black students, mostly young Black people, who were criticizing and pushing back against their Arab Palestinian or pro-Palestinian counterparts, or their, I should say, their colleagues, for what they saw as racism, racist behavior, dismissive behavior, just really pretty nasty stuff. And so the videos were actually going back and forth. You had pro-Palestinian or some Arab Palestinian young people making videos, clapping back at the Black students. And then it's the Black, I'm saying students because much of it seemed to be around the college student age, but I don't think they were all college students. I think they were just younger people. And again, I say younger people, for those of you who watched the videos, most of them were not older. I do remember one older Black woman was addressing the anti-Black stuff coming out of the pro-Palestinian camp. But it seemed as though most of the videos that I saw were younger people. Right? And I'm saying that just from the context of this college thing. So I addressed it then, and I said basically that this was an argument pretty much situated on the political left, and that's still true. I stand by that. And a victim mentality to boot, still stand by that, right? That the pro-Palestinian group, which isn't really so much pro-Palestinian as it is anti-Israel, believes that Israel's an apartheid state, lie. Israel's committing genocide against Palestinians, lie. Israel's an imperial colonialist power that's subjugating the Palestinians and Black and brown people. All those are lies. None of those things are based in the truth whatsoever, right? So for them to get allies on the Black American side, they are often allies who believe the same things about America. America is a systemically racist nation. Not true. Is there racism? Of course, there's racism everywhere, right? But this is not Jim Crow, Alabama, 1955. But for that mentality, I explained that in the whole thing. They believe that there's been no forward progress. There's been no movement. Black folks just fought, bled, and died for nothing. And it's as bad now as it's the new Jim Crow era. All those are lies. All those are lies, right? So, but if you believe those lies, you come together and you commiserate around your drama. So we're saying that's what it was. It was people on the left complaining. And so often what happens in the situation where we're going to kind of commiserate around our drama, at some point we're going to turn on each other, because dang it, I'm not going to be, I'm not going to see the bright side of anything. I'm going to always, and especially when my movement, the pro-Palestinian movement, particularly on these campuses, that's fueled by states like Qatar, Iran, that we've talked about that before as well, the amount of money, the billions of dollars that go to support these student groups that are actually often aligned with terrorist organizations. They're not interested in Palestinian quote unquote liberation. They're interested in destroying Israel, which is why they don't care about the poverty in Gaza that comes from Hamas stealing all the money, or the poverty in the West Bank that comes from the Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority stealing their money. They don't address any of those things. So anyway, and again, the document, if you're just coming in, again, Truth Power Live, I'm in Washington, I'm going to show you this. I want you to just see, this is the document. I'm gonna read from it here, but I just wanted to sorry, I'm still getting used to this, please forgive me. I want to somehow read just a couple of clips of it, but somehow unpack it here together. This is why at first I had a list of different things. I'm going to talk about this. Let's talk about this and really see if we can make some headway here and make this clear. All right. So that's the document. The document is BSU Statement on Withdrawal from TAHRIR Coalition. I'm going to skip the first paragraph and I'm going to start reading at the second paragraph. I told you part of what's going on here are victims complaining and attacking each other. But I also said in episode 11, part of what's happening here is a certain amount of realization within the Black community, within these younger Black folks, these organizations with the BSUs, the ASUs, which is the African Student Union, they're recognizing how very racist much of this pro-Palestinian movement is, which is exactly what Eldridge Cleaver found out, the Black Panther, back in the 1960s and 70s. I'm quoting the second paragraph. As part of our advocacy for Palestinian liberation, the BSU, again, this is from University of Michigan, the BSU, University of Michigan, has been collaborating with the TAHRIR Coalition to advance the Palestinian cause and to demand that the university divest from companies invested in genocide. Okay, and that's the victim thing. There's no genocide happening in Gaza. This relationship, I'm continuing the quote here from the document, has been maintained on the part of BSU because of a perceived understanding that our collaboration would further both Black and Palestinian liberation and that our community would be welcomed and respected. However, it has become increasingly apparent that Black identities, voices, and bodies are not valued in this coalition, and thus we must remove ourselves. I'm continuing to quote from the third paragraph. Members of our organization and our community have dedicated their time, energy, and well-being to the continued existence and strength of the coalition, despite repeated instances of being erased, belittled, and berated. These community members did so with the belief that the work of the coalition would be furthered by their sacrifice, that it would be worth the vitriol they received. However, as Black people, we are not obligated to sacrifice ourselves for any organization that does not value or understand us. Can the church say amen? Let me keep going. The anti-Blackness within the coalition has been too pervasive to overcome, and we refuse to endure it. Last paragraph. The historical ties between Black and Palestinian peoples are inextricably linked and should always be respected and upheld. Our struggles have much in common, and we know that we are stronger than when we stand together. The BSU's solidarity with the Palestinian people is unwavering, but the integrity of the Tahrir coalition is deeply questionable. We refuse to subject ourselves and our community to the rampant anti-Blackness that festers within it. For this reason, we will no longer be part of the Tahrir coalition. And then it's signed Peace, Love, and Solidarity, the Black Student Union. Now, again, I was reading from the document that was written by the Black Student Union at the University of Michigan. I addressed the first part of it already. That's why I referenced episode 11, 2 episodes ago, 2 weeks ago. You can check that out. Go to our website, ttplive.com, and then you can go check out all the episodes, because I addressed the victim mentality part of that. So I've already done that. So I don't want to do that again. You can check that out. Let me address the anti-Black part of it. Let me address this other part, because as I said a couple of weeks ago, though there's a lot of victimization going on here, there's also some red pilling happening. Those of us, any of us of any age, who've come to the realization of something, like Neo in the Matrix, where the red pill metaphor comes from, you recognize that were watershed moments. There were times when the light went on, boom, but even that necessitated further study, further reflection, further prayer, further meditation, that something may have jarred you, but it was that if you did go deeper, if you're a person who actually began to unpack it further than just that initial jarring, then you were able to maybe come to a deeper understanding of whatever the issue was that you were dealing with. And so in this case, there are Black young people, particularly, not just young people, but let me speak to them. Let me do a young people thing. For those Black Student Union members at University of Michigan, and then others, or others within any type of justice spaces in which you have been clashing with some of your colleagues on the pro-Palestinian side, be they Arab Muslim, be they, or whether they are Palestinian descent, whether they are of other ethnicities, but they are clearly pro-Palestinian, and that's part of their justice issue for them. I would have you consider, if someone's sending you this podcast, or you just happen to be walking along and checking something out, that the anti-Blackness, the anti-Black racism, as they say, within it is not a bug, it's a feature. that the racism that's in the pro-Palestinian anti-Zionist movement is deeply embedded by necessity. Why? Because anti-Zionism, despite what you've heard, anti-Israel animus, this let's destroy the Zionist project, all these things, they are rooted in Nazism, they are rooted in terrorism, they are rooted in Jew hatred and a desire to erase Israel and Jews from the map, which is why Hamas's charter calls for the destruction of Israel and for the erasing of Jews. I really, Brianna Joy Gray, the young lady who used to be with The Hill, I think is what it was, and she was on stage at a debate several months ago, and she was trying to explain to everybody that Hamas doesn't want to kill all the Jews. Hamas just wants liberation, like the civil rights movement. People laughed at her because it was that not only was she saying not true, it's demonstrably not true from Hamas's own words. This is a woman in the media. She's a journalist who is shilling for Hamas, even though she doesn't realize it, because Hamas would say in its charter, oh no, Brianna, we want Israel gone and all the Jews killed. It may sound like some sort of villain from 007, but it's real. It's real, which is how October the 7th actually happened. Hamas wants to destroy. Hamas leaders themselves have said, we will return to Israel and commit in October the 7th over and over and over. They said it themselves until Israel is destroyed. But beyond that, it has been proven over and over, especially during the time since the independence of the Jewish state of Israel. Especially since then, we're talking about the whole political fight that is pro-Israel, anti-Israel, how you see Israel. It has been fairly consistent that those who hate Israel, I told you before, what the whole victim thing is committing genocide, is committing apartheid. None of those things are true. But those untruths, it's not just that those are lies, not that just that it's terrorist propaganda. It is spewed by people who not just hate Jews, but hate Black people, hate Christians, hate other Muslims who aren't jihadis. But if there's one group they hate, it seems the most after Jews is Black, whether Black in the diaspora, Black Americans, or what have you, or Black Africans, which is why there are so many African slaves throughout the Arab Muslim world. That sounds Islamophobic. I don't care what you think it sounds like, it's true. And it's not an attack on Muslims. It's just true. There are Muslims, as we said before, who actually know these things and war against them. They are against jihadism. They are against the enslavement and subjugation of religious minorities in their area. But they are the minority in those areas, and they say and advocate or speak out through threat of death and violence themselves. It's actually happening. Muslims are dying. Some of the ones who are dying because they dare stand against the hatred of Black people. Again, I'll have to point you to, you can go to ibsi.org, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, for which I serve as the CEO. Click on videos and find Black Panther Eldridge Cleaver became a Zionist. Or you can read the article, ibsi.substack.com, and find that article. He explains it in a way that no one ever has, because he actually went to places like Algeria and other Arab Muslim countries, particularly if there was communists there in the area, and he saw Black slaves. It was a red pill moment for him. And he recognized that the very people who were asking for his solidarity saw him as a slave. They saw him as less than human. They saw him, or people who looked like him, as non-people. Those who are just now experiencing the anti-Black racism within the pro-Palestinian movement, I'm here to tell you it is a feature, not a bug. It is actually part and parcel of it. The same people who want you to hate Israel and this is why it's important to understand that anti-Zionism, is anti-Semitism. Hatred for Israel is hatred for the Jewish people. I'm going to go a little bit further. Just give me 1 second. There are some, again, I told you there's a lot of victims, and people got, some are going to get upset. Oh, you said it's victim blaming, or it's victims fighting each other. And yes, it's true. But beyond that, what it's also happening, let me say it like this as a pastor, let the church say amen. For those Black young people, and older ones too, who have experienced this anti-Black racism within the pro-Palestinian movement, I say pro-Palestinian because they don't care about the Palestinians either. At least the movement, that's not what it's about. It's about destroying Israel. For those of you who experience it, it's really the grace of God to you, because you are part of a movement as a Black person, and you've been sold a bill of goods about, if you are a real Black man or woman, then you're pro-Palestine, and they give you these quotes out of context, or they want to talk to you about Malcolm X, but not talking about the whole story about Malcolm X. They want to talk about the Black Panthers and not give you the whole story about the Black Panthers and the whole Palestinian thing. So this is why we do what we do. We give this information so that people can have all the information, all the data, all the receipts. You young people in 2024 are experiencing something that other Black Americans and other Africans experienced decades ago. That those who hate Israel and Jews hate you too. I know it, I'm going to say it again. Make sure this is on. Yeah, I got my indicator light. Those pro-Palestinian people and movements who are reaching out to you, Black student unions, African student unions, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the NAACP or any of them, CARE, reaching out to these other, which is a front group for Hamas, reaching out to Black folks. They don't care about you. They're using you. I say this to students for years. They are using you and laughing at you when you're not. So what you found is the stuff that's coming out, the hatred, the antagonism, it's there. It's within the movement. Oh, you're saying Arab? No, I'm saying within that anti-Zionist movement, there are Black folk, I'm not naming any names now, who've been a part of the anti-Zionist movement, who know that their colleagues are racist as hell. They know it. They know that there's deep racism within the Arab Muslim population there in the Middle East, particularly Gaza. They call there's a town that's called Abid. It's where there's Black Palestinians who are a legacy of the slaves who were brought there by the Arabs years and years ago. It's just true. So some of you are experiencing, and I say the grace of God, because you're part of a fraudulent movement. It's not concerned about the Arab Palestinian people. It's only using you as a Black person, as well as the people of Gaza and the West Bank, as cannon fodder. They don't care. Hamas doesn't care about Gazans. It sure don't care about Black folks in America or South Africa or Nigeria. As a matter of fact, do you know that one of the things that Hamas leaders did after October 7th, they took a victory lap in Nigeria. They went to Nigeria and did a series of speaking. Why are Hamas members going to Nigeria after the October 7th to do press conferences, to do media appearances? Well, one of the reasons why is because it is known that Boko Haram, that's slaughtering Christians in Nigeria, is ideologically linked to Hamas. I shared this story about a year ago. I'll share it again real quick. So there's a Nigerian pastor, colleague of mine. We've been working together, wonderful man of God. He told a story. He was in Jerusalem one day. He goes to Israel fairly regularly. He's in Jerusalem, just kind of taking it in and everything. And an Arab young man walked up to him. He said, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Nigeria." He said, Boko Haram. We help fund them. We are lying with them. We work with them. When the little boy in Jerusalem heard this Nigerian pastor tell him that he's from Nigeria, the first thing the little boy said was, "Not only do I know that Boko Haram is where you're from, we give them money," he said. It's the worst kept secret in the State Department. It's feckless. We don't. That's another conversation for another day. So when he saw this black Nigerian and wanted to know where he was from, the little boy got excited because he's saying, "Here's what we have in common: Hamas is connected to Boko Haram." Oh, Pastor, I'm sorry. That's just anecdotal. Boko Haram screams Allahu Akbar and kills Christians and other religious minorities. Hamas screams Allahu Akbar there and kills Israeli Christians, Jews, Muslims, and other people. If that's not an ideological connection, this is how they feel. And when Hamas was killing Israelis, they took a special pride in killing the two young men from Tanzania, those students. We've talked about this before too. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel has talked about it. I've talked about a little bit here on the show Truth to Power Live, that they stabbed them, shot them, even when their bodies lay on the ground, they continued to shoot them. Wait a minute. If we're supposed to be standing in solidarity, and black folks stand in solidarity, then why did Hamas and these Palestinians from Gaza so viciously and gleefully slaughter those African students? Maybe because the Black Palestine solidarity thing is BS. Maybe they took great joy in killing those African students, and maybe it's like a 2-for-1 sale. We get to kill these other Jews and Israelis, and we get to kill some Africans. What's happening now in the West, particularly United States, with this, it could be an awakening. There are some who are being red pilled. And how do you go further? So now I want to. I'm almost done with that. I'm on the TAHRIR website. I'm not going to share it with you, but I told you can go to TAHRIR. It's TAHRIR, TAHRIR, and then UMICH, University of Michigan, right? TAHRIRUMich.org. I thought it was interesting, and we see this all the time, but I'm going to read for you. I'm on their homepage, and I'm going to read the first paragraph. It says, "What is TAHRIR?" The TAHRIR, I'm reading this from their website. The TAHRIR Coalition is a movement dedicated to the liberation of all people. That's the first sentence. I want you to catch this. The first sentence is from their website. The TAHRIR Coalition is a movement dedicated to the liberation of all people. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me get a link here. I don't know exactly how this part works. I'm going to put the comments here. Boom, boom. And I'm going to put that there. So the link to their website I just put on, and I guess it went to not just to the YouTube page, but a couple other ones, because we're streaming on Instagram, we're streaming on Twitter and everything. So Twitter, you probably can't see this, but the link there, tahrirumich.org. First sentence: the TAHRIR Coalition, again, is a movement dedicated to the liberation of all people, period. Okay. Especially for the Black students, please listen to this. Next sentence: we advocate for resistance against systems of domination and struggle to destroy their manifestations at the University of Michigan, throughout Turtle Island, which is a leftist term for the earth, and across the globe. Okay, that's the second sentence. First thing, liberation of all people. And then second sentence, across the globe. Third sentence: we act in solidarity with freedom fighters in Palestine and revolutionaries everywhere, working to dismantle global imperialism, capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. So they use terms like global imperialism. They talk about everywhere. They said globally, people of all people, and then they talk about Palestine. What you usually find with these fake pro-Palestinian groups is they talk about liberation for everybody, and then they focus on Palestine. Why? Because they don't care. They, if you ask them to talk about the people who are just displaced, 16 million displaced Africans because of their faith in Christianity, their Christian faith, nothing. The hundreds of thousands, if not more, of slaves in Libya and Mauritania and Sudan, nothing, right? The Christians and others who are being slaughtered in Syria and Iraq, Palestinians in Syria are being slaughtered, nothing, right? It's a fake thing. They talk about universal around the world, and what they'll do, they focus in on Black issues in the United States to exploit them and the Palestinians, and then that's it. They don't talk about anything else. They don't deal with anything else. Why? Because they don't care about some sort of a universal suffering. They don't care about some sort of global, because that's come against all the oppression. They don't care. They are the oppressors. They are oppressors who set up fake groups to use Black people for their cause. They've been doing it for decades. It's been going on for decades. I'm going to read something else on the website. It says what we do. It is 4 things. This is the last thing. This is on the TAHRIR website. TAHRIR fights against University of Michigan's material complicity and systems of oppression. It entails, it demands it's 4 things. 1, divest from Israeli apartheid and genocide. Lies. 2, establish a people's audit. It explains what those are on the website later on. Number 3, boycott Israeli academic institutions. 4, abolish campus policing. I'm not even dealing with 2 and 4, just 1 and 2. Of the 4 things that are on there, 2 of them are about Israel. No other nation, no other conflict, no other situation is even mentioned. Israel. That right there, young Black people and others, should let you know that if they're talking out of one side of their mouth about universal suffering and coming against oppression and all over the world, and then they just sit right there on Gaza and Judea and Samaria, they're lying to you. Inconsistency, hypocrisy. Though any of us can be hypocrites, any of us can say one thing and do something else and have to line our actions up with our words. It's a life thing. We have to check ourselves, right? Nobody's perfect. But a consistent lying, a consistent saying one thing and doing another is generally an indication of a wicked heart. That's someone who is manipulating you. So the racism that is being viewed by some of the Black allies of the whole Palestinian thing, again, grace of God, because that racism for you and people who look like you is an indication of a much deeper thing. It's not just anti-Black racism. It is a hatred for others. It hates Jews, hates Israel, and hates your Black self, especially if you have the audacity. I remember, I don't have the video with me right now, but during the school year, post October 7th, African-American Congressional Representative Byron Donalds and several other members of Congress went to, I believe it was University of George Washington University, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was George Washington University. And he went there. I would take a moment, but if we're live and I'm doing it extemporaneously, right? And I didn't want to try to fumble around and get the video and mess something up, because I would mess something up. But maybe I'll show it during the little clips later. Byron Donalds is there on campus, both defending Israel and I guess this was something they may have decided to do. I don't know. A couple of the representatives from Congress are there. One of the professors, I don't remember his name, he begins to call out Byron Donalds, ask him why he's there. He's being paid by the Israel lobby, calls him Uncle Tom. I don't think he would say you race traitor, you Uncle Tom. Now, mind you, this is out in front of everybody. He's about maybe 20, 30 feet from him, yelling, because Byron Donalds has both press and others that are standing around him. So you can't really get really close to him at that very moment. And this man starts calling Byron Donalds out of his name, starts calling him a race traitor, he didn't say coon, but he said Uncle Tom. And now, again, he's talking to a sitting U.S. congressman, and it being disrespectful and unprofessional. To my knowledge, I believe he's a professor both at George Washington and at Georgetown. To my knowledge, he hasn't lost his job. To my knowledge, he hasn't been reprimanded. So I want you to consider a white, because the professor kept calling Byron Donalds was of Arab descent, clearly. I want you to consider a white male, especially conservative, on the college campus speaking to a Black representative of Congress, whether he was a Democrat or Republican. Don't let him be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus, and stand there and call him an Uncle Tom, stand there and call him a race traitor. If he was a white man talking to a black man, particularly if he's on the left side of the aisle, we would have never stopped here. It would have been in the news cycle for a week, but nothing. What that professor was doing was demonstrating the anti-Black racism deeply embedded in the anti-Zionist movement. He had no problem standing there in broad daylight in front of God and the angels, everybody. See, and everybody's got cameras now, right? Everybody's got always video. He had no problem. I believe since then he got some pushback, and I think his Twitter page doesn't exist anymore. You have to forgive me because I don't remember what his name is. I'm just doing, I wasn't planning on even saying this, but I'm mentioning that as another example. I can give you many, many examples. No problem standing there and calling this black man out of his name. And why was he doing that? In his mind, so he could free Palestine. Let me free Palestine by calling this Abid. Let me free. I'm gonna free Palestine by coming against this. I'm gonna call him, and not that Byron Donalds was tripping on the fact that he was black, is that the professor coming for him hated the fact that this black man had the audacity and the unmitigated gall to not bow at the altar of black for power. How dare this black man come on the campus and find out about how these Jewish students are being treated and the anti-Israel and the anti-American? How dare? Who does Byron Donald think he is? That's how he was talking to him. It's like from the Jim Crow, a boy, who you think you are? That's why I started calling him race traitor and Uncle Tom. I personally have seen it for years. I've watched pro-Palestinian people come to me and tell me that as a real black man, I was standing with Palestine. And then right after that, say some nasty stuff about black folk. You know what's amazing? Of the videos that were taken, oh God, I hate to even mention this. Much of what we know happened on October 7th. Hamas and the Palestinians who had joined in with them from Gaza, they took those videos themselves, GoPro cameras, telephones. And there was one audio recording. Some of you may have heard them. They were, a boy was calling his parents, "Mom, Dad, I killed 5 Jews. I killed them. I killed them with my own hands." And they're always, Al Akbar, the whole thing. They're like rejoicing and just having a downright praise and worship service about the fact that they're slaughtering these people. And one of the things that came out, and again, I don't have this here either, share with you, was an audio recording of a man saying that they had abducted several women. And he said, "We killed the ugly black ones and we had sex with the white ones. We killed the black ones," he said, "and raped the white ones." It's deeply embedded in it. And there are some who will actually, this beginning of this red pill moment, it will actually lead you to a more clear space that not only is it an anti-black movement, because it's an anti-Zionist and anti-Israel, anti-Jewish movement, it's a movement that's not about peace. It's not about reconciliation. It's not about coming together and building anything. It's about tearing down and destroying. First the Saturday people, they say about the Jewish people, and then the Sunday people, which is why in the areas of the world in which the Jews, particularly the Arab, Muslim, Middle East, have largely been expelled since the state of Israel was reborn, who are they slaughtering now? The Christians. First the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. So I wanted to say that. And again, you can go to the website, on the ibsi.org website, check out the information that we have on there where we discuss this issue, because not just the Eldridge Cleaver one, the why the Muslim Brotherhood is allowed on college campuses. We talked about Black Lives Matter and its connection, all this anti-Israel stuff. So there's different videos and information for you there as well. So, which brings me to, let me change these gears here because we're going to run out of time here. Brings me to the next thing, which was about, again, this is not Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel as a venture. This Truth Power Live is a completely separate thing, but we do deal with Africa, Israel, Black America, as well as other topics. But I want to talk to you about the fact that we, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, this past week, which was just Thursday, we're in Washington, D.C. for a wonderful event. Let me see this quick little thing here.
You're listening to Truth to Power.
Oh, no, I gave the wrong thing. How about if I do it this way instead? Boom. How about that? So on Thursday, this past Thursday, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel did its live and in-person forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. It was hosted at the aka Alexandria Hotel. And because of the generous support of our donors, including one who is an owner of that hotel, we were able to have an amazing time. We have started this. What happened in Washington, D.C. is the beginning of what we will be doing across the country. This particular event called the Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. The different speakers were there. I had the honor of speaking. My daughter-in-law, Olga Mashwe Washington, she spoke as well. Her topic was actually Vision 2050, that most of the world's Christians will be on the African continent by 2050. We discussed what that actually means. An amazing time. And the other speaker that you saw there was Simon Deng, a former Sudanese slave who lives now in New York. He came up to be with us, or flew down to be with us, and spoke as well. These events are purposefully intimate. No more than 20 to 30 Black pastors and ministry leaders there, and that will be the norm as we are having this event in other places. One of the reasons why we said that it's smaller or more intimate in that way is so that we can not just lecture and give information, so that we can discuss. And ladies and gentlemen, the conversations, the questions, the commentary from those Black pastors there was extraordinary, as it always is. And we talked about Israel, we talked about Gaza, we talked about Hamas, we talked about the politics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the United States. We talked on left and right side of the aisle. We talked about the biblical mandate. We talked about the scripture. How do we apply the scriptural part to the geopolitical reality that is Israel? We talked about who are the Jewish people. What is the diaspora? What does that mean that there are Jews scattered to the four corners of the earth, many of whom may maintain their identity? And this return is nothing short of a miracle. Jews from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from other portions of the Middle East. What does that actually mean? And we also, just like we talked about a moment ago, we spent most of our time here today talking about this whole red pilling of the whole Black for Palestine thing. We discussed that as well. We had the discussions around how that Palestinian movement has sought to exploit the Black community, both African and Black American, since the 1960s, especially since Yasser Arafat took the chairmanship of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, in 1969, how the PLO was founded by the KGB as a Soviet disinformation campaign, and how it has been used over the decades to try to marginalize and destroy Israel. And its number one target in that function has been Black American and African leaders. So we had that discussion. It was riveting. And I'm not saying that about us. I'm saying that it was very, it was not only well received, it's always well received. So one of the things I told them there as well, a couple of things. Number one, I said this before, two things. Number one, that over the years of us doing this work, the Israel, Africa, Black America, Black and Jewish thing with ibsi.org, you can find out more about it, is that the response from the Black community has always been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, almost always. It's never something negative. We rarely get pushback. I'm talking about in the real world. Remember, online is online, and even then, most of the negative stuff might be bots. But often the negative stuff that's actually said online is not from Black people; it's from other people, right? So, but on the ground, in the churches, in the community, when we're able to really have conversations about Israel, about Africa, about Black Americans, Jewish Americans, about the whole pro-Palestinian thing, justice issues, when we're able to have the conversations face to face, it's overwhelmingly even if we're dealing with difficult issues. I even brought up at some point Louis Farrakhan and his traditional shilling for the Arab Muslim slave traders because it messes with his story. We actually talked about that. Nobody got in a huff and marched out of the room. We actually discussed why he does that and what it has actually meant, how devastating it has been, how damaging, and how we have to actually stand up and speak the truth. The other part that I want to mention too is this. So I did another unscientific survey, and I've done this quite a bit. So some of you who are aware of, if you're more aware of, and then Truth to Power just doesn't deal with Israel and Africa. Today we have to deal more with it today. But for those of you who are aware of the war and all those things that are happening, the Gaza war, the anti-Israel protests on the street, if you're more aware of those things, then you may also have been aware that several months ago, the New York Times ran a article about 1,000 Black pastors who had signed a letter to President Joe Biden demanding a ceasefire. It was a big brouhaha within the whole pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel movement. We got the email sent to us, or the article sent to us, and people asking us questions. I've experienced this many times. I was explaining to people, especially if they were not Black American, they weren't from the church, they didn't have a certain perspective, that they were being gaslighted. This was a gaslighting. Pastor Simon, we need to come up with, let's get 1,000 pastors who stand with Israel. I said the vast majority of Black pastors do, or don't have a dog in the fight, or don't feel like they know enough, right? We had that discussion in the forum as well. And I'm saying that to say this. I get about 25 Black pastors and leaders in the room. At some point, I referenced that article from the New York Times and the reporting on the 1,000 Black pastors who demanded a ceasefire. And I asked those 25 pastors in the room, pastors and leaders, right? How many of you heard of this article or this letter or even this document of Black pastors demanding a ceasefire? 3 people raised their hand. I don't know. I'm not on math. Well, what percentage is that? 25%. I don't know. I mean, what percentage of 25 people? Whatever percentage that is, that's what it was. I know it's small. I know it's what, 10%, a little bit more. I'm making a point. Whereas people who weren't in the Black community and were part of either the pro-Palestine or pro-Israel space, it was either, a glory hallelujah moment or Allahu Akbar moment, or it was a, the sky is falling moment. And the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel was saying, calm down. The New York Times is running this because it's political. It's not about the Black community. I even said, with all due respect to those pastors who signed that letter demanding the ceasefire, many of them were probably unaware of what they were saying, because unless someone has really broken it down for you, ceasefire in the midst of a war in which Israel is trying to recover its hostages after Hamas had slaughtered or abducted, a ceasefire is the most immoral thing that you can say. That's like saying, let them rape, pillage, and plunder, even though they're going to come and do it again, but you sit there and make nice for the sake of peace. It's insane. Like I said, it's like me being a part of a Black town. The Klan comes, kills almost everybody, destroys everything, and then says, we're coming back for your Black behind next week. And you want me to cease fire. Right? No, not going to cease fire. You cease fire and get out of my way. Right? But we're saying that there was not an understanding. The fact that now some of the pastors in the room, they are very involved in ministry. Some of them are over different associations and different organizations. They're responsible for other pastors. So these were not neophytes. These were not, they don't know what's going on. My point is that it wasn't an earth-shattering thing within the Black community, that letter, just like the whole pro-Palestine thing. It has never spoken for the majority of Black Americans. It uses Black Americans to make people think that the free Palestine thing is a justice cause supported by Black people. It's just exploitation. And the fact that hardly anyone in that room had even heard of that article, had even heard of those 1,000 Black pastors signing this thing. In other words, though it was anecdotal, wasn't scientific, it wasn't a scientific poll, I just asked the question. It reminds me back during the post-2014 Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, Mike Brown. I similarly was at a event in Rochester, New York. It was a training thing for Black leaders, something that I would go to each year as when I was part of the staff of Christians United for Israel. There's about 80 something people in the room. Same 70, 80, I can't remember, something like that. Same thing. By now, Black Lives Matter had made a little bit of a name for itself. It was known as well as an anti-Israel group, and it was exploiting the whole Mike Brown thing, all that stuff. And I asked the people two questions. One, how many of you heard of Black Lives Matter? About 80-something% raised their hands. Of course, they heard of it before. And I asked them, how many of you are aware that Black Lives Matter also has as part of its charter, part of its writing, that it's pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel? And they all looked at me. And maybe one or two people raised their hand, maybe three, out of a room of about almost 80 people. And that was my figure. I told people back then, that was back 2000, about 10 years ago, 2014, 2015. I was saying that all that free Palestine and we Black folks in the pro-Palestinian, I said, that's not the majority of the Black community. They're acting like it is. And when I asked these Black leaders that were in the room, hardly any of them knew anything about, they heard of Black Lives Matter, but they didn't know anything about Black Lives Matter anti-Israel stance. Most of them knew absolutely nothing about it. And what does that prove, Pastor Dumasani? I'm glad you asked that question. They're not trying to affect Black attitudes. They're just using Black bodies. They're using Black people to tell everyone else that this is a legit justice movement because this Black pastor says, and this, they're trying to, that's why they're always faking and shaking. That's why they can never present to you data about the percentage of Black Americans, a real survey, who stand 10 toes down with Palestine, especially against Israel, right? They might have great sympathy for the Palestinian people, but they're not going to show you any type of survey that shows you that anything close to the majority of Black Americans are against Israel. I don't care how many times they quote Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, especially before he went to Mecca in the first place. They're not going to, I don't care what other quotes they give you, they're not going to be able to tell you. And Black Americans, they'll say it, but they can't prove it. Black Americans stand with Palestine. It's never been true. Yes. So in that forum in DC, that's why I asked that question. Not so much that I was going to present it as, I mean, I talk about it anecdotally like I talk about now, but I was talking about it, and it dawned on me that I always have to remind myself, just like in preaching, you have to sometimes remind yourself that everyone may not have context for what it is that you're saying. So I paused and asked them, have they heard about this letter? Most of them had no idea what I was talking about. Again, because it wasn't for them. So there's much more, and I'm gonna run out of time here, and I say that only because we try to keep our podcast at about an hour. It might expand a little bit later on, especially if we have some of our other guests and everything like that. But I am going to try to stay true to that here. There's more, but I did want to deal with those two things. Share that with you. Next week, maybe we'll talk about that whole Green Party thing that happened. I believe that was in Colorado, or was that in it was in one of the other Western states. I'll have to check that and see. That's another discussion. I'll just say this: domestic politics, freedom of speech is on the ballot this November, y'all. Your and my First Amendment right to say whatever we want to say is on the ballot. And I'm not talking about Donald Trump stripping it away. These videos surfacing of Kamala Harris talking about, these companies need to be held accountable and blah, blah, blah. Man, that's just code. That's code language for I'm getting ready to shut down your ability to. Yeah, so we'll talk about that another time, all right? We will definitely discuss that a little bit later on, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank you all for joining on To the Power Live with Musani Washington every Sunday at 4 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you on next week. Everybody have a great week.
To the Power Live with Jimmy Sunny Washington.